Welcome to Klamath County, home of Oregon, Sunshine City, Crater Lake, and the absolute best of talk radio, interviews, music, and comedy in the world. WFTP proudly presents the Queen of Talk Radio, Princess of the Silver Screen, Master of the Culinary Arts, award-winning author and filmmaker. It's the Jennifer Dawn Show.
Yes, Mario Prado, please.
Speaking. Go ahead. Hello?
Yes, this is Jennifer Dawn from WFTP Radio, the Falcon.
Oh, fantastic. It's great. I heard that you just put this up. How long have you had the station up?
I'm in season 1 and I've done 3 episodes and you get to be number 4 and I'm just cold calling you out of the blue.
Well, it definitely is. Well, actually, we're fortunate because I just finished dinner and I was going to sit down and go over some of my notes because, obviously we're still writing the Falcon. A lot of things have been happening and that has affected the story to a certain extent, but that's really what's going on. So yeah, let's do something. I'm game.
Well, you're part of this radio and...
Right.
It's Stephen Gilbert Morris, the Falcon, but it's also WFTP, the Falcon. And, I think it's amazing that I get a chance to talk to you. You have an amazing history and repertoire under your experience. And I'd like you to talk a little bit about that because it's not just about the Falcon, but the Falcon is a major part of why the radio was created, and I'm just very fortunate to work with you. So, in fact, Kat Pacino was on the other day, and I did an interview with her, and she talked about your photography.
Well, actually, yeah, it all started, actually, first of all, I'm a native of Hollywood, California, not Florida, and I was born and raised here. So I've been totally influenced, if not, overtaken, or it's in my blood, the entertainment industry. And it was really when I first picked up the camera was, I don't know if you're going to like this story, but technically, we in our family, we're a Hispanic family, first generation American, and my parents are from Colombia. My father's from Colombia and my mom's from Panama. And they had made a USC. And my mom ended up being a CPA. My dad ended up being what they call an editor in film when film was film. And it's all spawned from there. Dad would sometimes come home and bring work of a commercial he was working on. And we had a moviola, which is a device that actually plays the film and you can actually see it. And I learned a lot because he was a freelancer. And then when he finally got a chance to join the union as an editor, then he stayed in that for, forever and ever until he retired. In the same way as my mom, she studied accounting and then eventually moved up to be a CPA. But during that period, obviously I was the firstborn, the number one son, and then we had a sister, Senya, and then a brother, Raul, and then another little sister, Elvia. And we were all born and raised in the entertainment industry, and in the terms of exposure. My sister went into the youngest sister went into paralegal. And my older sister, she decided, I'm the oldest, she decided to be a mom. And she's got 3 fantastic kids. So, I guess we're making moves, if you will, in that respect. But long story short, we used to have family reunions, and they were big reunions. The family would travel. We have relatives in Northern California, obviously, in Southern California as well, and we would get together. We would try to get together at least twice a year. But one time I was snipping with how should I say this, Cupid's heart. And I had a crush on a cousin of mine.
Oh.
I told my dad, hey, Dad, you know what, this year I like to take pictures and take pictures of family. And my dad's no knucklehead. You know, he knew that something was up. So he said, okay, you know, you can do that. Tell you what, I'll give you 2 rolls of film. And this was just the day of the event. So I kind of threw this curveball at him, but he wasn't, he kind of knew what was going on. So he said, okay, well, let's take a few moments and I'll show you how to use it. And I said, yeah, Dad, I know how to use it. Yeah, no problem. So I loaded up the camera and I spent most of my 2 rolls, you know, photographing my cousin. She was beautiful, very attractive in that respect.
And now, how old were you at that time?
I was 14 and she was like 17 or 18.
Okay.
So it was definitely, you know, puppy love in that respect. And, you know, so the event went great. My dad took back the film. He took pictures of the family. And we had a big family gathering. And there was like, you know, 150 people. And we were very interracial in that sense. And I think that really helped me understand a lot of the dynamics that, you know, a lot of cultures have. We had Filipinos, we had blacks, we had obviously whites. There was a couple of Italians in there. Some strong Europeans, and we were all family, okay? So after that, I was excited to take the film down to the lab. You know, this was still when we had film, wasn't digital. So we took the film in, and in those days, you had to wait like 2 or 3 days so they could process it, make proof sheets, and all that kind of stuff. So there was the most grueling days for me, you know, those 3 days. And we went back down to the lab, and the guy comes out. We knew the lab tech guy. He was pretty nice. His name was Joseph. I said, Joseph, so what do we got? And he pulls out 2 little canisters and put it on the desk. And he said, the film didn't go through the camera. What? And my dad just there. He's not saying anything. He's not going to say, I told you so. Nothing. He just said, oh, that's too bad, son. I'm sorry to hear that. So we went back, and I was completely bummed. You know, I was thinking of the image that I took and the whole thing. And you know, my niece was, or my cousin, excuse me. My cousin was, you know, she let me take pictures of her and the whole bit. So it was kind of cool. And she wasn't resistant. We went and just around the house and the whole bit. So when we got home, you know, my dad had the 2 canisters, and he called me into his office. He had kind of like a little office in the house, and he said, listen, I want to talk to you. And so I went into the office and I sat down, and out of his pocket, he took the 2 canisters and he put it on the desk, and he says, now, are you ready for me to show you how to use the camera? And from that point forward, if anyone was going to show me something, I would pay attention.
Yes. Yes.
It is one of the best lessons I had at the very beginning of my career as a photographer. If someone's willing to show you something, you really got to put your ego aside. You really got to sit down and listen.
Well, and you know, you have a famous saying, it's all part of the journey.
It's all part of the journey.
I think, is that the day that expression may have come to fruition? Actually,
I knew that it was I didn't have the expression yet. I was only 14 at the time, and I just learned to listen. But that actually, you know, it's all part of the adventure, is the way I say it. And to me, the word adventure, if you look up the word adventure, and if your listeners would listen to this, I would love them to Google adventure and read the definition. It is nothing of what we think it is. If you look at that word actually means going on a journey where there could be death. Now, you know, you go to Disneyland and, you know, you want to go on an adventure, right? Well, you know what? Look up that word.
Oh, I did right now. Adventure. Okay, an unusual and exciting, typically hazardous experience or activity.
There you go. A hazardous experience. So And so, whenever I run into a brick wall or something like that, I said, well, you know what? This is part of the adventure. This is part of the adventure. And one of the things that during that period between 14 and actually 21, my dad, I believe, he set me up to learn certain things. And he took advantage of the situations that I ran into. And I think, you probably, well, I have a pet peeve, Father's Day. I really do have a pet peeve on that. I don't think
Okay.
it should be called Father's Day. I think it should be called Dad's Day.
Yeah,
The
because
reason
there's a
I say that is
difference.
because, yeah, there's a big difference. Anyone can be a father.
Right.
Father is a sexual act of, impregnating someone and you have a child. Well, you know what? That's just the beginning. I mean,
Right.
there is the dad part, and I really feel that I wish the powers that be would really wake up and maybe change that day. It should be Dad's Day.
Dad's Day,
And what it does,
because
it
dads
underscore
take a lot more energy, a lot more effort, and it's a lot bigger job than just becoming a father.
correct,
Yeah.
correct. Now, on the flip side, there's Mother's Day.
Well,
I think
same
Mother's Day is
thing, right?
appropriate. Well, no, I think Mother's Day is appropriate because mother is basically, at least from my perspective, it is the nurturing of a child. Okay, now, yes, there are bad mothers and there are good mothers and there's mothers this and that. But the consensus, I think, is that a mother is someone who nurtures, period. And I think that's something
Anybody can become a mom, but it takes a heck of a lot to be a mother.
there you go.
So you've
Absolutely.
got the opposites going on there,
Yeah.
in
So
a
would you?
sense.
Yeah. That. So I think that there were a lot of situations in my life with my dad that I believe has truly helped me, and a lot of it too is this. I always thought, silly me, that all parents were like my parents. Now I'm not saying my parents were the best. I'm saying that my parents attempted. I could see the effort. Yes, we had arguments. This is, that's part of the adventure. Um, but I think that he really wanted me to be able to stand on my own and be able to weather the storm because he knew, and my mom also knew that they weren't going to be here forever,
Yeah.
in that respect. And I think part of it is the part of our culture that I was brought up with. Obviously, as you can tell, my speaking is, I would say, certainly. I think most people, when they listen to my voice, they don't see who I am in that sense.
But when did you get into film?
Well, when I got into films, okay, first of all, you have to understand in 1995, there was a major shift in our industry. Film was being slowly but effectively canceled, and digital was seriously moving in. And I was still photography. I mean, I had a studio. We did brochures. We did catalogs. I was in the fashion industry for about 7 to 10 years, shooting catalogs and the whole thing. My education, I was fortunate enough to go to Art Center. My parents, sent me to Art Center, and I studied lighting there. And obviously, lighting was for film, motion picture and stills. And I took the still path. And then during my summer, I decided that, I was doing photography and I was doing very well. And what was happening is that some of my clients were saying, you know what, we got great pictures, but we don't like the way these catalog guys are doing the catalogs. And I said, well, I don't really have too much of a say in that. So I decided one summer to go to trade tech. And I stayed there for a year while I was still shooting. And I learned magazine and graphic design. And so when I finally finished that, it was about a 2-year program. I offered to, some of my clients the ability to shoot as well as do their catalogs. And I'll tell you the truth, that was fantastic. I mean, I was busy all the time. And then eventually in 1995, the digital was coming in and the industry completely collapsed. a lot of my clients just said, hey, listen, you were doing digital. We don't have to go through this process. This is your last catalog. And I could understand that. They were evolving. And so what happened after that, after 1995, I decided, I really got to learn digital. So I closed the studio and I went back to work in a camera store, at which point, which was Sammy's Camera, one of the best, and still is one of the best camera stores in Los Angeles. And I started working there. And the only condition I asked was, obviously I was qualified. There was no problem there. But I didn't know digital, so I asked my supervisor, okay, I tell you what, I don't have a problem, coming to work and working that way, but I want to be able to take one digital camera home a night, and I may need to take it for 2 nights, but I want to learn this whole thing. And they said, fine. And in a year, I had literally learned every single camera that Sammy's, thought was worthwhile. Sony's, JBL's, Canon, Nikon,
Wow.
All of them. And I stayed with the company for about 3 years. And then after that, I had learned enough, experienced enough, and went on the weekends to shoot the digital, that I ended up buying my first digital camera, and then I left Sammy's.
Wow.
And then I guess the rest is history, because a lot of those cameras had the option of shooting video. And in all reality, I was shooting stills that were telling a story, but I just didn't have the emotion to go with it.
Right.
And so that's how I just, it was really not something that I knew about in terms of, stuff like that. But I lent myself out to work as an assistant. I would do craft services. I would, do any kind of PA work. I mean, I was making money, so I could afford to go on a weekend and shoot and not even shoot, just be there. And I learned so much, watching them do their thing. And that's how I transferred into shooting film, shooting digital capture. And I guess the rest is history. And during that time, I met a lot of great people. I learned a lot. And now I'm using that, using that approach and some of the ideas that I learned for the Falcon in terms of visual storytelling.
Right.
So,
now, you always call yourself a line producer. Can you tell the
correct.
audience what a line producer is?
Well, okay, there really isn't a school in the entertainment industry, in the film business, mostly in film, not so much in television, but in film they have a position called the line producer. And a line producer technically is the go-between the producers who, sign the check and the crew. And a lot of times the line producer is one of the first people that a producer will find, so that I can help the producer find the cameraman, the lighting man, the sound man, the wardrobe, the craft services, the anything that has to do with the technical side of the production. I don't get involved with actors. I don't get involved with the casting. That's really not my job. I do get a chance to read the script, and so I can understand the tone and the method, and that I use in order to find the camera crews that I need.
Now,
So,
correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm sorry to interrupt, but don't you also have to check out locations for shooting?
Well, no, you have a team to do that. Yes,
Okay,
yes.
okay.
And, obviously that falls under the line producer. I would have to, find a what we call location scout to be able to do that. I have under me my office people that would get the permits and so on and so forth. Now, a lot of times as a line producer, as much as the location scout does his work, they're only looking at that location for a certain thing. I have to go there literally and make sure that it's going to work, whether we can shoot 2 or 3, days there, or we're going to shoot a day. So I have to look at the logistics. Now, a very important, eyes and ears for me is the location scouts. And they have, I don't think they have a union. That's an interesting question. I have to look into that. But I would look at a location scout based on films that I see that my producer wants to get. So I would make a call and say, hey, who's your location scout? And I would then, use them because they were following the style that may reflect our story that had to be done. So there's a lot of how should I say, a lot of networking that goes on behind the scenes. People don't really realize the tremendous amount of networking that has to go on in order to make a film happen.
Oh, they think you can make a film in a day. But what are some of the most exciting places you've been to shoot a film, to look at the locations? What are some of the most interesting places you've just loved?
Well, so that you have to understand that I didn't shoot, so I was just a line producer. But I did some work in New York. I did some work in Vancouver. Did some work in Florida. I had some great times with you, Jennifer, out there in Arkansas. Which again, the potential was unbelievable. And again, you had gathered. You had done most of the work on that. I just showed up as a cameraman, but you had done the casting. You had written the script, you had got the locations. So when I arrived, pretty much everything was done.
Yeah, we were shooting 3 locations simultaneously, 3 different locations simultaneously for that film. And you handled Sir Hellion, which is Mike Marino, and the courthouse, and a couple other locations, but we really chopped that out. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, the fact that you could orchestrate and have 3 crews operating simultaneously, overlapping, not getting in each other's way, was genius in terms of, shooting. And in a way, obviously, we were in a much different situation. Not all productions can necessarily have 3 cameras going at the same time. They can have 2. Usually they have what we call your B team, second unit. And they shoot the transition images, the aerials, the car driving on the road. We don't have the actors there. We have, other people that sit in and do that, because the cost of the actor driving a car that we don't even see him is that's not cost effective.
So when you transferred kind of in a way from still and this and that and, magazine layouts and fashion, and you decided you wanted to go into film, and then you worked on my film. You've done major photo shoots that are just beautiful. But now you're leading into a feature franchise. What made you want to take that leap?
Well, it's you know what? It is a leap in one sense, and in another sense it isn't. And technically, when you do a production as a line producer, you're basically doing the same thing as you did before. The only difference is now you're working with different personalities. You still have wardrobe, you still have makeup, you still have sound, you still have transportation, you still have problems. That comes with the dirt. But the reality of it is that the same departments are necessary on every film. So the Falcon, which, by the way, this time out, with your help, I'm actually doing a book. Yeah. And I feel so comfortable with the book, only for the simple reason that the storyline that we're working on, to a certain extent, there are going to be people that are not very, how should I say, positive about it or pro about it, because they have their own perspective of the way the country should go and so on and so forth. The Falcon is to me an action adventure wake up call to the American people. And I just want them to be aware of what is happening, or what I perceive is happening in my story, this what-if story, And if your audience would like to know more about that, they can actually see a little bit of the direction that I want to go with this film if they go to our .com, which is www.Steven, and that's STEVEN, GilbertMorris.com. No spaces, just those 3 words put together. And I think they would be able to see the direction I'm going. I don't like the fact that many people, and you have mentioned this before in some of your interviews, Jennifer, that we're afraid. We're afraid.
Yeah.
And I don't like that. We shouldn't be afraid. Apparently we're afraid to ask questions. We're afraid to question authority. And
well, there's one thing I don't get, and maybe you can answer this for me. Everybody's afraid of being canceled, but you can't be canceled unless you let someone cancel you. Can you? I mean,
Well, you know, this idea of canceling. Okay, the technology has given us um, a certain feature. I would call it a feature because this whole cancel thing. We have embraced technology, which is a good thing, and we have braked it in such a fashion that we have, to a certain extent, and you know, I could be wrong on this, Jennifer, but we have given away not so much our privacy, but our attention to some very, very major platforms. And those platforms can be anything from TikTok to Instagram to Facebook to Tumblr to all these different platforms. And the dark side is if those particular platforms, which have their own, how should I say, referees, if you will, and if they don't particularly care for the idea that you are suggesting or presenting or defining, they can cancel you. Now, the sad part is that there has been no, how should I say, mission in the term of what their service is, in terms of their responsibility to the individual, as well as responsibility to the community, as well as responsibility to the country. You can't be afraid of something if you don't know about it. And I think that is part of the cancel culture. They have this situation that, well, if you're not a Democrat, I don't want to hear what you got to say because whatever you're saying is a lie. And on the other side, well, if you're not a Republican and you're a Democrat, well, you don't really have anything to say. I don't want to talk to you, and that's it. And so what has happened is not necessarily on purpose, but we've become so complacent with the fact that if you don't like someone, you can, in a sense, cancel them, which is, I don't want to hear anything more about you. I'm going to cut you off, and so on and so forth. And I believe that is a serious problem that we have to deal with.
I guess when I'm interviewing, you know, actors and, you know, I interview some pretty big names, and I'm hoping to interview some even bigger names. And if they're worried about being canceling, they don't want to talk about what's going on in America. But you're bringing it out in the Falcon. And you're also being genius in the way that you're doing it because, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're doing a book and a script and you're following the same lines and doing it simultaneous. Usually the book comes out first.
Well, you know what? You're absolutely right. But in my mind, there is a certain urgency that I believe needs to be addressed. And the very fact that you had actually suggested to me that why don't you do a book? And I think that's genius. I think that it is. I'm not going to say it's unheard of. I'm sure. I can't believe that you and I have come up with this novel idea that, oh, well, why don't we shoot the script and write a book at the same time? But it does. One of the things I really have learned from you as you are an experienced book author, the approach that you take to tell the same story is very, very different, as it should be, than what I'm visualizing on screen.
Yeah, there are two different lanes.
There's two different lanes. And what you and I have created is this kind of respect, which is definitely due to the approach that we take of a situation and how we express it to the reading audience versus how I express it to the viewing audience. And one of the beautiful things is, because I did a little research, when it was suggested that I do a book, and actually it was from you, I did some homework. I mean, I'm a line producer. I have a responsibility. And you had mentioned a number of pages, so I did a little research on that. I went to Grammarly, and I went to Word. And in Word and in Grammarly, they will give you a profile of how long it takes to say what you've read versus how long it takes you to read what's been written.
Right.
You see? And it was fantastic because what I found out is the length of what I believe will be a 2-hour film, okay, if we turn that into a book, it would be about anywhere between 5 to 7 hours of reading.
Right.
Now, the beautiful thing about reading a book is that you can put it down and pick up where you left off. You see, in a film, unfortunately, I don't have that. I don't have that luxury. You know, I got them for 2 hours and that's it, or an hour and a half in that case.
So what I'm writing in 6 hours, you got to produce in a 2-hour format.
Right.
With dramatic effects, with emotion, with vision.
Right.
And we're doing it at the same time.
Oh, absolutely.
You know,
and I tell you, I'm having a blast because when you take my material and put it into chapter forms, I look at, obviously we look at books as chapters, and we look at scenes as, films.
Act 1, Act 2.
Yeah, absolutely. I have seen you take what I would visualize, and I would read it and I said, God, this really sounds good. This is going to be a good book to read. And it's not that I'm not a reader. I am a reader. But the technology has how should I say, wooed me more towards the visionary. And just as an added note, you're interviewing a lot of people, and they have a certain fear of being able to express truly what's in their heart. And I believe part of that is they have to self-protect themselves, because so often the media, which to me has really, and I don't mind saying this because I don't mind, the media isn't the media anymore. It's a propaganda machine.
Exactly.
And I don't mind calling it propaganda, because they are trying to push an idea or a point.
Well, I call our government a regime, and I'm not afraid to say that,
Well, no, but here's the sad part. See, you're a book writer, okay? So you by default are not afraid to open up a dictionary.
Right.
And seeing what it means, okay? And just like you were doing earlier in our conversation, I asked you to, that a lot of people don't really realize what the word adventure really means. And it means to go on a journey or a how should I say?
Hazardous.
It is hazardous.
I've never thought of a journey as hazardous. Why would the definition be hazardous?
Well, the word was developed before we went around and softened it up a little bit. We look at adventure as happy and fun, and yes, it's scary, but it's always been safe. No.
No, because Bill and I went on an adventure at one point. We were following GPS, and it took us down this wrong way, and we were low on gas, and that turned hazardous. We were scared.
There you go. There you go. So there's a dark side to that. And getting back to the people that you want to interview, and some of them are hesitant to express themselves, you have to understand that the propaganda machine will take things out of context, and they will use that out of context for their own benefit.
And they don't care who they hurt.
Well, you know what? It's not a question they don't care, because what has happened is we have dumbed down our respect and responsibility in our leadership, okay? And I'm not going to say who really set the tone in that respect, but there are a number of supposedly leaders which, you know what? Do me a favor. I'm on the phone here. Can you look up the word leader and the definition of a leader, if that's possible?
The person, leader. The person who leads or commands a group, organization, or country.
Okay, could you read that again? Because I was stepping on your lines. Go ahead.
The person who leads or commands a group, organization, or country. But that's different than what it means to be a leader. Leaders set direction and help themselves and others to do the right thing to move forward. They create an inspiring vision, then motivate and inspire others to achieve it.
Now, that's assuming that the goal is one that is what?
To achieve
Is
the
it
positive and to want to
Positive?
move forward in a positive direction.
But positive to who?
Yeah.
To the middle class, to the lower class, to the upper class?
If you're
to
talking
the,
about the government, our current regime is not leading us into a positive. They're leading us into their own power and their own money and power.
Well, okay, so let's assume that's the case. Let's just assume that's the case. If you look at the Constitution, it is actually the other way around.
Yes.
But nobody wants to take the time to see that. Everyone assumes that the Constitution is old, 245 years, and because it's old, okay, they don't realize that Constitution that was designed was able, if you look at the way it was structured, to be able to handle things like the internet.
It
things
saw
like
the future. Our forefathers envisioned not just their time, but they envisioned a future for the positive, for the people.
Positive. But any system can be corrupted.
Yes.
So those that are in power, those so-called leaders, are certainly interpreting the Constitution to their own will, to their own benefit, rather than that of what the forefathers wanted, which was for the people.
All right, so let me ask you this.
Sure.
You're going to be president. You understand the forefathers. What would your vision be compared to what is today?
Well, the vision would be that the person that walks into the White House is represented by the people. He has no allegiance, no responsibility to any party, whether it be Greenpeace, whether it be the Democrats or Republicans. What his job is, in all fact, as a leader, is that he is to look at the benefits that these parties can do for the people in terms of their work, in terms of their safety, in terms of their education. And to me, that's a marvelous positive thing. I can't see anything negative about that.
All right, let me ask you another question.
Yeah.
All right. Why are there Democrats and Republicans? Why isn't it no party system and whoever's going to lead the country is there for the people? Why do we got to have the fighting all the time in our government?
Well, because our history, not only that of America, but of the world in general, it's always been groups that believe that they have the answer. And if you look at the Constitution, the reason it was built the way it was built is because our forefathers, even though they were farmers, okay, and they didn't really know business in a sense, they realized that they needed a system that could protect the people from those that would try to subvert it. And what the point that they said in that is the reason why we have a system. The Constitution has never been built on parties. It was only one party, the American Party.
Yeah.
And their effort was literally to help the country be at its best. Okay, and it wasn't a question whether you're a liberal or a Republican. That was never written into the Constitution.
I have one more question.
Go ahead.
All right, our forefathers, they were farmers. They held jobs. They did politics part-time because they cared about the country. When did that stop?
Well, it stopped when there were those who realized that they could take the Constitution and interpret it in such a fashion and basically hoodwink, the public.
So they lost touch with the people.
Oh, yeah, and they did it with intent.
That's crazy.
It wasn't by accident. It was done with intent. And unfortunately, you would tell a certain party. Now, you have to understand one thing. Let's make sure we understand this. When we talk about the United States, we are literally talking about little countries.
Yes.
The needs that are happening in Minnesota and places like that are far different than those that are in Texas, Louisiana. These are, in a sense, and can be looked at as countries. They have certain needs in order for them to prosper and so on and so forth. The federal government, technically, is a government that all these little countries, which are the United States, have decided that we would work with, okay, so that we could have transportation equally across all these countries or all these states, that they would establish a certain safety parameters for all our products in terms that we would share between our states and export, okay? They would also help us understand and get the best kind of quality health, not free, but the best quality health for all the states so that they could operate and move, how should I say, move forward.
Move freely.
None of that.
Move freely.
Yeah. So one of the things that I'm always enjoying is I'll take the preamble. The preamble to the Constitution is a summation of what all the amendments and all the articles are about. Okay. So the preamble basically outlines the direction of the Constitution for this country. Now, let me tell you this. If you read the preamble, if any of our listeners read the preamble, they will realize that this country is nowhere moving in that direction. If anything, we're moving in the direction where 98% of the world is at with their so-called governments or regimes or dictatorships, whatever it might be. And so in a sense, we are how should I say, we are the oddball in the world. And for those that run the world, and I say run that, I don't mean in a literal sense, but they are moving to run the world, we are a problem for them. We cannot, they don't want this kind of idea running around that, it's the people who should ask or tell the government how they want to be managed.
Okay, hold on. That brings me to a point. All right. Is that why you started the Falcon?
I started the Falcon in 2013 when I realized that certain things were happening that just to me weren't American. First of all, in the beginning, okay, the educational system was even across the board. We all had to know how to read and read well. We all had to have an understanding of mathematics. We had to understand the 4 R's, reading, writing, arithmetic, whatever it was, okay? But somewhere along the line, they decided to create different levels of education. And that, I believe, was done with intent. In 1960, if you look at your histories, and if you just simply ask Google, which again is a double-edged blade, you ask Google, when was social studies and civics removed from our school curriculum? It was done in 1960. 1960, there was no reason for us to push civics in school and so on and so forth. Now, in 1960, anyone that was born then, okay, that's almost 2 generations that have not been taught how this government operates.
So my whole educational system, because I was born in 59, has been totally wrong?
Not totally wrong. I think it's missing some important values. In other words, if you want to have a country that the people are going to tell the government how they should want to be handled, okay, then you obviously need to teach them about money, okay? You need to teach them about how the government operates. I bet if you went to anybody here, let's say from 40 years old or younger, and asked them, can you write down all the different departments that are in our government system and how they work?
Well, we had to learn those, the executive branch, all the branches.
The branch, okay, the Senate, the Congress.
Yeah, we had to learn all that. I learned all that.
Well, you probably went to a private school.
No, I went to a public school. It was in Ashland, Oregon, Hellman Elementary. I loved my school, loved my
Right.
teachers. You know, I think I had a very good education.
Yeah, let's go back one step. I believe that during that period, especially during the 60s, okay, because of what the turmoil was during the 60s, okay, education and understanding the government was a priority. Not a top priority, but it was a priority. And also, too, the caliber of a teacher. He was not a teacher. I believe he was an educator. And
Yes.
there's a difference. You need to, you got
I
to
had
know.
educators growing up.
Absolutely.
And,
I
you
mean,
know,
when I was, now I'm 71 years old. So when I was in school, my math teacher, he would say at the beginning of his class, when I first got into school, and this was in junior high, the instructor, this is an educator. He said, I'm going to collect all the books. Okay. And he had them all on his desk. And he asked us, why were we learning math? And a lot of them said the truth. Well, we're learning math because we have to, we're in school. But quite honestly, instructor, teacher, okay, we're probably not going to use 90% of that. We're not going to use algebra. We're not going to use necessarily geometry or physics.
But they
or any
don't
of that.
realize they use it every day.
Of course they
They
don't.
just don't realize they're using it.
Well, it's only because they weren't taught like you and I were taught. You see, when my math teacher said, the reason you learn math is so that you can think and we can give you solutions. You may not use the process in a mathematical sense, but if I can at least break it down so you can approach a problem, whether it be mathematical or life, okay, you will at least begin to have some idea of what you do next. So math wasn't just about math. It was about learning how to think and how to be able to solve a problem.
Yes, but now let me ask you this. If you're going to set up a camera and you want a particular shot and you need a 90-degree angle, all right, and then you want to pan around at 360 and then you want to go back to a 45-degree angle, isn't that algebra?
Oh, absolutely.
You're using it in film.
What happens is that they learn those principles, but they don't also learn the possibilities.
The application.
Yeah, absolutely. So once you learn 90 degrees and you learn 360, that's fine and dandy. There's nothing wrong with it. But that's just scratching the surface, you see. And but if you learned it in school, you would now have something to compare it with and also begin to understand perspectives, okay, the depth of field. All right.
Yes.
These are things that are unique to this art of camera work, but it would make it so much better if all the crew understood that, so they would understand, oh, okay, so the sound we want is to give that same kind of impression. I'm going to put the microphone here because sound travels a certain way.
Yes.
Has a certain technique, so on and so forth. The actors, at the same token, if they also knew that, they could say, oh, I get it, so I'm walking into it and become more part of the scene. So here's where the rubber hits the road. If everyone knew a little bit of math or geometry in this particular case, the subtext of what they were doing would somehow all come together. There wouldn't be a question that says, well, why do you have me on the left side? Why don't on the right side? Okay? If they understood if the educators that they had told them, okay, here's a perfect example. When you look at a page, because we're Westerners, we scan from left to right, not because it's natural, because that's the way we've been taught.
Chinese go right to left.
Exactly. If you're Chinese, they go up and down. Okay? So if they were visualizing setting up a scene, they would naturally, they wouldn't be thinking of it, but subconsciously, they would shoot the way you scan an image. It's the way you scan the paper.
Yeah.
You see? And so these are things that an educator would tell you in your writing class. These are the small little tidbits that open up so many doors, okay? It's unbelievable. Do our teachers do that? No, because they're teachers.
I think I had great educators.
Oh, yeah. We were fortunate.
Yeah,
I think
we
had
were
some
very fortunate.
Here's a perfect example. In my history class in junior high, the instructor took the class and divided it in half from the front to the back instead of from left to right, just the front. So he collected all the books of all the students that were in the front rows, okay? Took them all and put them on his desk. The ones in the back had the books. Now, he told the students in the front half that you cannot look at the book for this semester. And he passed out this like 20 sheets of information. And what it was how far a man could walk with a 60-pound back on his back, how far he could walk if he was in the snow, how far he could walk if it was raining, how much a horse could carry, okay, how many horses you would need, and how far they could go pulling a cart. And he then pulled down the map, okay, of France, and he says, this is the battle Napoleon had when he first came about to be, a great leader. If you want to look at it, depends on what side of the fence you're on. But we had to, the kids in front, had to literally fight those battles, knowing the weather, knowing the distance a horse could go. And the kids in the back, they had the history books, so they could see the movements that were made.
Oh, that's classic.
Isn't that fantastic?
That is awesome.
Sure. Some of the kids would go to the book to find out what was the best move, what was the next move. But because some of them actually stayed with what the instructor said, you can only work with the sheets. You have to take over this territory. This is the year. This is the weather. Look at your sheets. Move your men.
That is cool.
I swear to you, we learned so much more about what it was like to be on the ground during that period
than just reading in a book.
Now, that's an educator.
That is an educator.
And to me, when we talk about now, because of that, I was one of the students in the back in that class. But what the conversations we had from the front and the back, when the Vietnam War happened, when the Korean War happened, which I was certainly there, okay, I could totally get at least some idea of what those men were up against.
I was a little smartass really in college in a way, but I was a straight-A student and I graduated with honors. But on my term paper, it was about the Cold War. Well, I wrote a perfect paper because I really did a lot of research. I learned and everything. But the cover sheet was an iceberg.
Oh, very good.
Oh, yeah, but when I was having coffee at the coffee shop across campus, and the professor came in and was handing out the papers with the grades, he come up to me and he looked at me and he said, "You do know the Cold War wasn't about snow and ice, right?" And I said, "You read my paper, right?" He goes, "Yeah, you got an A. But I give you an F on the cover sheet."
Well, see, I would have turned around and said, "You're absolutely right." But the tip of the iceberg is only the tip.
Oh, see, I wouldn't have thought of that. That would have been great.
Oh, yeah, because to me, that iceberg that you put on there is exactly what the Cold War is about. We saw certain things on the surface, but there was a lot more going on underneath. You see? Yes, the metaphor of the ice and the whole bit, but I would have used how an iceberg is.
Yeah, but, well, the cover sheet's only the tip of the iceberg. Wow.
There you go.
I should have thought of that.
Well, see, that's part of, that's just the way we were brought up, hon. It's everything that I've learned is nothing that I necessarily came up with. It made sense at the time, but I had some fantastic educators.
Yeah, well, I had the right concept, Oh,
yeah, you were on the right track.
But now let me ask you this. Everything we've talked about, and with the way America's going today, okay, you created the Falcon.
Correct.
But you created it in 2013. Excuse my chihuahuas. Okay, I got chihuahuas.
Yes.
But in 2013, that was Obama era.
Correct.
All right. But it doesn't matter what era it was. You saw things that made a necessity. Could you tell people what the Falcon is about?
Yes, and you know what? A lot of them said, "Mario, if you say that to anybody, you're going to get in trouble.
Why?
Because I was literally saying what was going on, what wasn't right. So the Falcon concept came in 2013. Excuse me, 2015. 2013, I saw certain things and I pointed it out and said, "Mari, leave it alone." These
But I
people know
never
what they're
heard
doing.
about it. I mean,
No,
I'm
because
just
by that
hearing
time-
about it now, and I'm involved, and I think it's amazing.
Right. Well, one of the things that the only person that has pushed back on the Falcon at this point was an individual that's in Philadelphia, and he still loves the story, but he says, "Why don't you tell the truth?"
Oh.
And I said, first of all, you can't tell the truth today because everybody has the truth. The Democrats have the truth. The Republicans have the truth. Okay. The communists have the truth. Everybody has the truth. So that's one of the reasons why I decided to write a fairy tale, a what-if story. What if?
So the
And by
Falcon
being a
is
what
a
if-
fairy tale.
I call it a fairy tale, but I look at, if you look up the term fairy tale.
I don't see it as a fairy tale.
Of course not. No, of course not, and I don't expect you to. But when an individual I know that's wearing, a Democrat or Republican, I said, what, I have a story I wrote. It's a fairy tale. It's a what-if story. It's more of a what-if than fairy tale. Fairy tale, I think, is a misconception, and the audience looks at it that way. Well, here's a perfect example. Listen, your readers, your listeners know about Alice in Wonderland. Alice in Wonderland is a great, great story, okay? But you know what? Alice in Wonderland was actually a political treatise on what was happening in that period of time.
All right, let
And
me
that
read
also-
this then. Fairy
Yes.
tale. A fairy tale, let's see, no, I need a definition of a fairy tale.
That's right.
There-
Definition of a fairy tale.
Yeah, definition. The meaning of fairy tale is characteristic of or suitable to a fairy tale. All right, especially marked by seemingly unreal. All right, beauty, perfection, or vice versa. That doesn't make any sense.
Okay, first of all, where are you reading it from? Are you reading from Wikipedia or are you reading from the
A
Oxford
fairy
Dictionary?
tale is a magical story for children like Cinderella or Rumpelstiltskin. Usually begins on Once Upon a Time. I'm trying to look up the definition. And that's the only thing I'm getting when I'm looking on definition of fairy tale.
Yeah, but where is it coming from? Wikipedia, or is it coming from Oxford Dictionary, or is it coming from where?
It's coming from Safari.
Right. Okay. So here's the definition of a fairy tale. A fairy tale is exactly what they said, but generally has a lesson to be learned.
All right.
That's the reason why fairy tales have survived so long, because every fairy tale has a lesson. And that lesson is about trying to do better or what can happen if you do certain things. Okay? There is always a lesson in a fairy tale.
All right, so we have all of these Google engines, search engines, everything else. And what do they just give us what they want? I mean...
Yep. They're giving you what they want. They're giving you exactly what you want to hear, as opposed to educating you as to where it all started, how it came to be, why it exists, and for what purpose it served. You see? And this is what educators do, not teachers. Teachers are building a curriculum.
Well, see, I'm looking in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, and it says a children's story that is a fantasy.
Okay. But
So-
it doesn't go any further than that.
No, that's all it says. That's the Merriam-Webster dictionary. But now I do have a gold embossed, beautiful, huge dictionary that stays on a podium with a light above it. It's not right here right now, but I'm sure it might say something else, I hope. But this
Well,
is
I'll
what
tell you
they're
what,
teaching our children.
Since you're recording this and you're actually pre-recording it, I'd like you to look it up in that book and see what number 3 of the 3. Generally, a dictionary will give you 1 or 2 or 3. How should I say? expressions or explanations of it. Of the
Well,
word
the
fairy
only
tale.
other definition it gives is a story about fairies. That's a fairy tale. I mean, this is what they're teaching our children.
Yep.
A fairy
It
tale
is.
to me is a story that you can take that would become, that's not really true but can be true, but you make it kind of in a different verse, but you're still able to tell a story in reality.
Well,
But
okay, here's a perfect example. You and I have learned the story about the three little pigs.
yeah,
That's a fairy tale. One built his house of straw, one built his house of wood, the other one built his house of brick. These are lessons. These are lessons that are being told in a story-like manner. A fairy tale is, to me, a what-if story, and you learn a lesson from it. It doesn't necessarily have to be true. It's what it's trying
it
to
has
do
a
is
meaning.
it has a
So
meaning.
you call the Falcon, you call it a fairy tale, but a what if. All right, what if, continue, what if?
Okay, so so in a nutshell, the Falcon is a what if story. The what if story is this: if the night after the 39 individuals that signed the Constitution, there were 55 there, but only 39 signed it, and they were obviously the majority, so it would pass. The others had objections for different things that were in the Constitution. All right, so the night after, 5 of our forefathers, this is the what if story now, okay, this is what if,
Right.
got together and realized that any document can be corrupted. Anything can be corrupted. So they decided, these 5 men, they each came up with a question. And they put all these questions together into one document. And it was, as far as they're concerned, a fail-safe document. A document that would only come to the rescue of the Constitution. Now, because it was done in secret, and because they didn't want to tell anybody this, and for good reason, okay, they went ahead and put it into a trust. Now, this trust was simply told that every 5 years, they would open up this particular document and read the 5 questions, and simultaneously they would compare the nation and the Constitution at that time and where it stood based on these 5 questions. Now, sometimes 3 of the questions were answered no, sometimes only 2, and so on and so forth. But in 2020, these 5 questions, which I know that your listeners want to know what those 5 questions are, they'll have to read the book. These 5 questions all were no in 2020. In that instant, the document was activated, and whoever was a trustee would then become appointed to follow the rules of that trust. And the 2 rules in this story, in this what if, in this fairy tale, okay, is that they had to find the bloodlines of the individuals that signed the original document 245 years ago, bring them all together to sign the activation document. Now, you have to understand, our country, in my opinion, is really a representation of all nations. So 245 years of people in this particular country, they're not all going to be the same. They're going to be mixed.
Right.
And in our story, the 5 heirs, okay, from the original signers, one's a teacher, one's a, an evangelist, one's a social worker, all right? One is a politician, and another one is an IT, computer programmer. Now, let's assume for the sake of argument that these 5 questions go against what the particular government system we have today. They don't answer the questions properly for the people.
It's happening now.
Well, it's happening now, but remember, I'm just telling a what if.
Right.
So I call them the black hats in our story. They hear about this document that's being pulled together, and they don't want it to be heard about. They don't want anyone to think about it. They want to get it off the table because it's going to upset their particular plan that they have for us.
What is their particular plan?
Well, first of all, you don't ever want to have a system where the people themselves tell you what they want. That doesn't work. It's always the other way around. We're going to tell you how it's going to be. We're going to tell you that if you want to travel to other states, you have to have a special ID. Otherwise, you can't travel.
Well, they're doing that in Oregon. You have to have a real ID. Or
Well,
you
they call
can't.
it real ID.
Yeah, or
California.
you can't fly.
Can't fly. So what does that mean?
That means I can't get on an airplane and fly anywhere unless I have a real ID, but I have my driver's license, but a real ID is something different, and not quite sure yet, but that's what they've enacted in Oregon. You have to have a real ID.
There's a perfect example of who's running the show. Are we running the show as the people? No.
No.
Okay. Now, they're going to explain it to you that, well, you know what, we need this because we have terrorists coming in, and this protects the people.
Well, that's what they're saying. You have to have a real ID so that they know that you're not a terrorist or whatever. But the difference between a driver's license and a real ID, I haven't really figured that out yet.
Well, if you look it up, the point is the driver's license simply says that you have the skill set to drive a vehicle on the road.
But it also is an ID for who I am.
Well, that's it.
Right, but a real ID? All right, I'm not quite understanding that yet.
Well, I don't think this is we have to take that as a separate subject. This would not be
Exactly. But that's what they're trying to enact in Oregon now. So
well, they're enacting it here in California.
They are?
Yeah, it's happening all across the state.
All right, so that just proves you're not a terrier or something, a terrierist, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, the bottom line is that there are a number of examples that's showing that we don't have the rights that we originally had many years ago. And a lot of that is because we don't understand how the system operates. And
yeah, but you and I understand how the system operates, and we see where they're going. You know, I make fun of this real ID thing, but I understand what they're doing. It's a matter of control. And they're trying to control the people. They're trying to take the guns. They're trying to... I don't even want to go into everything they're trying to do, because right now my child would not go to school if I had a grade school child.
Well, see, this is the reason why I'm doing the fairy tale. This is the reason I'm doing the Falcon. And this is the reason why you're writing the book, because you know that there's something important that needs to be said. But it has to be presented in such a fashion that these people wake up. Well, right now, the most dangerous words, okay, Jennifer, in this country, there's 9 words that are the most dangerous words to the regime, if you want to call it that, to the black hats that I call in my story, to the political system. And that is simply, we the people, for the people, by the people. That is the cornerstone of our Constitution. And they do not want you to understand what that means. They do not want you to understand what it means. I just saw a video of a woman that a number of years ago, okay, she had got a license to carry a gun, okay, but the rule said that you can't carry the gun inside a public place, but you can own one, okay? So what happens? She goes to dinner with her parents in a regular small coffee shop, and a crazy guy comes in with an automatic and starts shooting everybody. Had she been given the right by the law to carry a gun, which she is legally right to do, she could have probably saved more than half those people in that restaurant. But because she followed the rules of the law that said, sure, you can have a gun, but you can't take it into a public place. Sure, you can have a gun, but you can't have it loaded, you see, is to me a reason that in a situation, if there was an upheaval, okay, and they followed the rules, that very government that gave you the rules could easily overpower you.
Okay, but what about those people? There was a couple. and they had all these protests. They were in a gated community. Do you remember that? And these
No, I don't.
protests came through the gated community, and they were threatening these people. So the man and the woman, they had permits. They were legally right to have their weapon. They simply stood in their driveway and held their weapons. They did not point them, but they were charged and not the protesters.
Of course, because that is again the subtext of what's happening in our system. Our
Why
system
aren't
should have
you
been-
afraid to speak out?
Why? Well, one of the reasons why I'm not afraid is because someone has to speak out, and I believe I'm speaking for a lot of people that don't speak out. You see, I believe that the reason that we have a country that has prospered so well in the last 300 years is not because of the rules that the rest of the world operates on. Is because the rules is that we, by our how should I say system, have discussions, have conversations, not debates, but actual discussions.
But you know, I get that. But there's so much division. People don't want to have debates. They don't want to have discussions. It's either one side or the other. What would you say to the people?
Well, you know what? I can't say anything to the people, but the only thing I can say, and you're not going to like this, well, maybe I think you'll understand. The reason we have the problems we have is because we elected those people. We didn't do our homework. We did not do our homework. We did not hold any of these politicians, okay, responsible to the promises they made.
You know what? I don't think it's even about parties. I wish they would do away with the party system, but I didn't. I'm not saying I didn't vote for Biden. But I'm not saying I went for Trump. But I'm an independent. But we didn't really have much choice at that time.
Well, that's the whole point. That's the whole point. Because the laws are written in such a fashion that anyone that has enough money for advertising and propaganda could easily express it, and you have no choice. My father told me that there's only 3 ways to play the game. You play to win, you play to lose, or you don't play at all. And I believe the American people should get up and say, look, we don't like the way this game is, we're not playing. What if somebody threw a war and nobody came?
What if the school system's doing what they're doing and everybody took their children out of school?
I would say this, and I agree with what you're saying, but
That's a stand-up thing that wouldn't hurt anybody, but it would sure shut down the crap they're doing.
Not necessarily, because they could hold out longer than we can, because they have laws saying that your child is not in school, then you can go to jail.
No, you have homeschool.
Well,
but I know not every parent can do that. But the school system seems to be kind of rotten right now to me. And they want to take all your money, but they don't want to educate your children. So what if people just took their children out and homeschooled them? They
can't do that because they created a system where both people have to work. When I was growing up, there was enough money being made so that my mom could stay home and make sure the kids were being brought up properly.
Yeah, my mom was a stay-at-home mom. My father was military.
There you go.
You know.
So the point is that they slowly made it so it's almost impossible. You know, the prices of things have gone up 4 times, 5 times, maybe 6 times than what your salary or your pay is. And I don't understand why people have not said anything about that. You want to raise the prices, you got to raise that so we can afford to be able to have a decent life.
Mario, why aren't the people standing up against what's happening?
Because they don't know how to put in words what's happening to them.
But what about the movie The Patriot? They didn't have internet. They didn't have any of that. The wars before.
You have to be very careful with that, Jennifer, to be honest with you, because that was once then, it's not now. Now we have to look at what we have at our fingertips. We have influencers now that if we had the influencers, they would talk. Here, I'll tell you the truth. To be honest with you, what's really sad is that the so-called people of the cloth, okay, I don't hear a word from them.
Who are they?
Your priests, your rabbis, your evangelists, they should be up front and say, look, this is not the spirit of
No,
this country.
because everyone's afraid. They're curtailing. They're curtailing to the regime out of fear. If they speak out, they're canceled or they're wrong or something happens. I mean, so many people who should be speaking out are not speaking out. And I'm not saying to riot, not even...
No. There's no
I'm
reason
not
for
saying anything about violence. I'm just saying, why is nobody... Can you actually say that the typical person, typical person, right, 9 to 5er, can't see what's going on, but they do see what's going on, but they won't speak out?
Well, because they're letting somebody else speak for them. I'm a Republican. I'm going to let my people speak for me. I'm a Democrat. I'm going to let my people speak for me. I don't like everything they're saying, but you know what? I belong to this party. I mean, really? Okay? I'm sorry. I'm for the country.
Yes.
Okay? The country has to operate for the people.
Well, they've just raised the taxes again. The federal government just raised taxes again. We're trying to buy a home, and it was at 7%. Now they've raised it another 0.25%, which is a lot when you actually look at it, and you're trying to buy a home. So they keep raising it because they want to help with the debt that the country is in from the spending of our current regime.
Well, the spending wasn't by the people. Okay?
No, it was by the regime.
Well, there you go. So then, I mean, right then and there's enough to say, listen, since you can't seem to be making things happen, we need to get somebody else in there.
What would your father say?
Well, my dad, you know, he's a pretty black and white kind of guy. He would simply say, you know what? You have got to stop them at the voting booth. You have to write in exactly what it is that you want. All right, then, thank you. Got it.
And you know what?
So,
that kind of brings us back to full circle from when we started this interview, and your father taught you a lot, and now we're back full circle to what your father would say today. And we don't want violence, we don't want that, but we've got to wake up, because the woke are not woke, they're asleep. We've got to be woke. And
well,
so
that's it. See, whereas if you could look into the laws, and I think there's a way that if you were to simply write in that vote, that statement has to be addressed because we're a citizen.
And we need the Falcon.
So the story of the Falcon is exactly that, to tell you, you know what, you do have power. But we have to help them understand how they can exercise that power. You know, the story that we're writing, we're going to actually implement 3 bills as part of the storyline. Haven't gotten there yet in the story, but there's going to be 3 bills.
And we don't want to give everything away, you know.
Oh, okay. Then you cut this out. You have to cut this section.
No, I'm not going to cut it out. No way. You want to talk about it? What are the 3 bills? Tell the people the 3 bills.
Well, one of the bills that we're considering to actually activate is that the Congress has no right to borrow or spend money without us knowing that is for the improvement of our country.
I haven't voted on any of that.
Okay, not to give any aid to another country, only so that they can set up a situation and get what they want. They have to have a much more solid reason. A perfect example of this is, was it weapons of mass destruction? Weapons of mass destruction. Everybody bought it. Nobody asked. I bet you a lot of people asked and they were silenced.
All right, can you tell
There was
me
not
why
one.
our current government, we used to have to vote on these things. I haven't
Correct.
had any ballot come across that Biden or our current regime has produced that we actually vote on. They're doing it in the House and the Senate or in the Supreme Court, and they're not involving the people.
No. But then again, there's an issue that's been growing year after year, and that's lobbyists. What is the purpose of a lobbyist? Look up the definition of a lobbyist before we close this out. I'm going to have to close this out because I got to
Yeah,
get some
and it's been a great interview, and I think people are really gonna be learning a lot about this. All right,
Well, we're gonna see-
lobbyist means a person who is employed and receives payment, or who contracts for economic consideration for the purpose of lobbying. I just love Webster's. Oh my God. Or a person who is principally employed for governmental affairs by another person or government entity to lobby on behalf of that other person or government entity. Okay.
Okay.
My
Okay,
head's
to put it-
confused.
Here's my definition of a lobbyist. I have been asked by the Ford Motor Company to convince an opponent or his constituents that buying my car is better than anybody else's. And what we'll do is we'll help you push certain bills that you want done if you help us to basically lock everybody else out of this particular situation. A lobbyist is an individual who basically works behind closed doors, who makes deals and promises, okay, that would initially help one group, but not necessarily help the community in general.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to have to close out because we have guests.
I know,
now.
but I want to tell you, I want to say, do you want to give some shout outs to anybody, Mario? You got a lot of listeners. You've had a great career. You're an amazing individual, and I'm so proud to be a part of your world. Who would you like to give some shout outs to?
Well, I would like to give it out to every American who's been born in this country, regardless if they're supposedly legal or illegal at this point, that they study the Constitution and they understand what it is. I hope with the storyline that we're creating, we can at least give them a little peek at their particular power and their value to the system. There are a lot of rules that are not including us as citizens. And I think that is the most dangerous thing that can happen right now. So in my mind, if they could only take a moment and read the Constitution and understand that they have been hoodwinked, that they have been misdirected, that they have been basically told half-truths, mostly lies, and that is the reason why we are in trouble right now. That is the reason why we're having educational problems. That is the reason why we're having gender issues. That is the reason why we need to get IDs in order to go from one state to the next. There are a lot of things that seem to be happening. They seem to be happening and are controlled by something larger that is really dangerous to the American concept. They don't want America to exist. We're a big problem. And they want to really remove us in that sense.
I agree.
And they're doing a damn good job on it. And we
Now,
have to stop it.
In closing, you had a song for the end of your show.
Yeah, you know what? The James Bond song, you had asked me earlier about a song, and I would say For Your Eyes Only.
There you go.
James Bond. And that would be great because it has a good subtext to it,
It
in
does.
that respect.
Mario Prado of Los Angeles, California, thank you very
Right.
much. I appreciate you. Everybody, you heard it from Mario, and there's a hell of a lot to be learned in this conversation. Join the Falcon, get with us, and be with America. All right, everybody, that was our show for tonight with Mario Prado. Hope you enjoyed it, and until the next time, WFTP Radio, the Falcon is out of here. In closing, for Mario Prado, for Your Eyes Only, James Bond theme song.